Do you have a comic book or other creative project that you've been putting off, or maybe you haven't even started yet, but you want to? Well, you're not alone. I'm right there with you, but today is the day I get back to it. Hopefully you will too. This is the 100 Days of Making Comics Challenge, Week 1. Greetings, people of the internet. I'm Scott with Serkworks Art Labs. Welcome, mad creators, to the underground laboratory where we create robots, aliens, zombies, and other imminent threats to humanity. A lot of times we do those in comic form, at least I do. That's what I'm going to be getting back to, is my comic book, Young and the Dead. So this is the book. This is the most current issue, but it's been a little while since I put one out, but we're going to fix all that this week as we're starting this challenge. Anyway, my comic book, Young and the Dead, it is a kids versus zombie story. It's kind of in the vein of, it's like Goonies meets Night of the Living Dead. So if you're into all those old 80s action movie where kids are the heroes, then you might like this book. Check it out. It's on my website at serkworks.com, and I'm just excited to get back to it because it's been a while since I've actually been working on this thing. I've had other things going on, of course we all have, but you know, I'm making it I'm making it, you know, my goal to actually get back on this, and that's what we're doing with this challenge. So if you're not familiar with the 100 Days of Making Comics Challenge, the way this thing works is you spend 30 minutes a day, every day, for 100 days straight working on your comic book, and then in order to hold yourself accountable, you put your progress online daily, whether it's on Instagram, you could do it on YouTube like I'm doing. Now, of course, I'm not doing it daily, I'm gonna be doing it weekly, but I kind of give myself a pass because I've done this challenge. This is my 4th time doing the challenge. But if you're just starting off, it's important to put that information out. Put your progress online every single day. You can do that on Facebook, Instagram, and whatever social media you use. If you got a Discord that you're involved with, but you got to put it out there in public just to hold yourself accountable and to have other people also hold you accountable. That's how it works. Anyway, this whole challenge was started way back when with Kevin Cross, because he was finding he was having hard time working on his comic book project. That's the predicament that I'm in right now. I've got so much other stuff going on, and you know, this is to be honest, this book, as much as I love it, it's a personal project for me. It's not something that brings in a lot of money. It's not something that pays the bills or anything like that. Hopefully someday it will. Maybe when it's all finished and I collect it in a single volume instead of the floppies that I'm doing. I'm really planning on pushing it and everything, and then maybe we'll see. You know, maybe we'll run a big Kickstarter, see what happens. But for now, just these individual issues that I'm putting out as sort of benchmarks in order to just help me with my progress, because it's, you know, if I had to take on this whole thing at once as far as like a big graphic novel, I'd probably never get it done. But at least now I've got 4 issues that I can hold up, and it shows that I've at least done something. But I got a lot more to do, and that's what we're going to get to today. So if you are in the, you know, the same spot that I am, where you've got a project and you've put it off, or you know, you haven't started, it can be a little overwhelming. I mean, I honestly dreaded, you know, getting back to this because it's been so long. I'm like, where do I start? But I'm here to tell you that once I made that commitment that I was actually going to work on it, and I'm doing a little different. I'm actually trying to put in 1 hour a day, and that's still not a lot, but it's a little more than the 30 minutes that's technically required for the challenge. You can do more if you want, but I've decided I gotta at least put in 1 hour a day, and that's kind of what I'm doing. Now, I want to take you through the process with me so you can kind of see my, you know, how I do this. And everyone's got their own ways of doing things, but maybe the way I'm doing things can give you some ideas or some inspiration or whatever with your own project, and that's kind of my hope. So I'm going to share what I do, and hopefully it'll be a learning experience for both. Like I said, I've done this a few times. If your first time, it might be even more valuable to you. But I think anyone watching this, whether you just or maybe you're already doing it, maybe you're already taking this challenge yourself, and it's somebody that you can kind of commiserate with, who's going along that journey with you. That's what we're gonna do. But we're kind of in the beginning now. I mean, I'm just starting this. We did a little preview episode where I gave you some tips and things to help you get started. But now that we're in the thick of it, that's when the real work begins. So let's get to work. Now, like I was talking about, I was dreading putting this book out or getting back to the book because it's been so long. But once I started, I mean, it was just, things started to come together, and I was just like, I'm just so into it right now. So happy that I did that. So there's that little bit of fear that you face when you're first starting something, it's just kind of easier not to get into it. Once you do, it's like, oh man, I'm so glad I'm doing this. And that's the feeling that I'm kind of having right now. Now, because it's been so long, I was asking myself, well, where do I begin? And if this is a brand new project, it's a little different story. But for me, because I already have 4 issues done, and I have a good idea where the story's going to go and all that, but it's just in notes here and there and everything. Nothing really put together. So the first step that I did was kind of reevaluate my story. So I just started going through the 4 issues kind of with a fine-tooth comb, looking at every little thing and how that would actually connect to what I'm doing now, and because there's things I forget. It's been a little while since I worked on it. Things that I had set up that I definitely want there to be some sort of payoff with, little, just little things that I added, and some things that I forgot to add that I probably wish I did now that I'm where I am now. We're gonna get into a little bit of that. We're gonna talk about some of these the process of what I'm doing now, and hopefully that can help you guys out too. So now I'm sort of rereading my books, refamiliarizing myself with the story, going over the notes that I have, trying to get a general idea of where I want the story to go. I mean, I sort of have that. I've got pretty much the conclusion and sort of an epilogue already basically written, at least the ideas. I mean, there's no dialogue or anything that deep, but I know where it's going to go. But in order to get to that place, there's a lot of things that need to happen, and it's starting to connect these dots and filling in like plot holes and things like that. One of the things I really worry about is sort of like writing myself into a corner, and to avoid that, I'm trying to find solutions to things that I had written before in the story. If you've read the story, or maybe you didn't even pick up, there's a lot of little things that I put in there that I've done so because I know it's going to pay off later, and I've got a general idea of how that happens, but not exactly. And as I'm starting to, try to make all these puzzle pieces fit together, some of them are like, ooh, I don't know if this is working. Or when I kind of comb back through my earlier issues, I'm like, oh man, I wish I would have put this little thing in there. It could be just a small little visual element that would come into play later that I didn't do or whatever. And that's one of the as much as I advocate for doing floppies, and there's a lot of people that disagree with me. They think that the single issue comics are just sort of an old way of doing things, and but I still think for almost everyone that if you struggle with creating your comic, it's always good to start small and break things apart. So that's why I advocate for that. And you don't have to make a massive print run. Even if you print a couple for yourself via print on demand, at least you have that, like I said, you can hold that up, and it shows that you've done work. It gives you that sense of accomplishment. So that's why I advocate for doing single issues, floppy comics, or whatever. The problem with single issue comics is, and this is the same if you're publishing web comics, if you're putting your stuff out there digitally as you go and you haven't completed the story, is if you wrote your whole graphic novel out, you put it out there, you know how it's going to end. So in that process, before anyone sees it, you can go back and you can make whatever changes you need. You can't really do that if you've already published it. Well, you can, and I may have to do a little bit of that, some just minor changes, things that most people probably wouldn't even notice, like it's just a little item. There's things in there that I might have to go back and change. I'm going to try to avoid doing that if I can, and I don't want to get to the point where if it's like I'm kind of like George Lucas special edition it, where I'm changing all this stuff to make everything make sense. But in a lot of cases, I think I can work this stuff out so it works. But there's just a few little things that, like I said, I don't even know if anyone will notice. And if they do, it'll be kind of become a fun sort of Easter egg. If you're collecting the single issues, you can go back and, oh, that's different. There's a slight thing. If you look here in this page, that little panel right there, there's something that wasn't there before. And maybe I'm overanalyzing. Maybe these are things that won't even get called out or people won't even notice. But one big thing I have is I try my hardest, and it's almost impossible to totally succeed on this, but to avoid having any kind of plot holes or things that people said, well, that couldn't happen because of this. So I sort of analyze that stuff as I'm going. But as I'm working on this comic, it's really weird because it's just the way things are starting to come together in a way that I wasn't expecting. So I don't know about you guys, but I would like to know your process, how you approach writing a comic book. But typically what I do is I just jot down a bunch of just different ideas, and a lot of them are sort of disjointed and they haven't really connected yet. They're just ideas, and it's a matter of kind of figuring out a way to make these things fit together cohesively. So because that's the way I normally do things, that's the way I started doing it this time around. I went back through, I've got my iPad here that's got basically all my rough notes, and I go through and I'll say, oh, this needs to change, or is this really going to work, and sometimes I'll change the characters around. Before it was going to be this character doing these things, and it's like, oh no, I think it makes more sense for this character to do this particular task. So a lot of that shifting around, and some of that comes back to what I was talking about before, where I kind of set something up for one character to do something. So then I've got to find clever ways to make it all work. But one thing that I started noticing when I'm doing is, because of the way that I work, where it's just a bunch of stuff and it fit all this stuff together, I started writing one particular scene. And I'm writing just rough dialogue, nothing like it's gonna end up in the final draft. But I just sort of writing it like just in a linear fashion. Oh, this happens next and this happens, and it just started to unravel, and it started to just take on a life of its own. And it was really, for me, it was kind of amazing, because that's usually not the way I work. But as I'm going, it's like boom, 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 and all these things, and it's like, oh wait, no, I have to change this thing around, and then, oh wait, no, this works better, and it's really weird, but it's going in sort of this linear fashion. And then I'll get to another point that's like, so for instance, there's a scene down here that I need to get to, but I don't know how we're going to get there. And all of a sudden, as I'm starting to write sort of in order, it gets to that point and it connects, and it's like, wow, this is great. I don't know if I'm really curious, because different people work different ways, and some people ask how I do it, so I'm trying to explain this. It could be a little abstract, and the problem is, and this will get easier as we go on through the challenge, as I get to show my thumbnail process and my sketching and all that stuff, it's a little more tangible. It's hard for me to show the writing stuff, so I'm gonna put some of that stuff out there where you can see me drawing and everything, but right now, I'll cut to a few things just to be writing. But the other thing is, this story right now, we're getting to the point we're going to wrap it up. It's got, this is going to either be the last issue, or there might be a couple issues, but I'm writing them all together. So whatever the case is, I'm going to have this story done, and then the full story done before I start illustrating. And just to let you know, there's a lot of revelations and things that are coming, and there's a lot of spoilers and things. So it's going to be, I got to find a way to share this stuff and not give away a lot of stuff from you people that are waiting. I got to find that balancing act, but I'm really happy to see how this is sort of coming together. Now, some of the other things that I do when I'm plotting out my stories, and I've covered a lot of this in my series Making Comics 101, if you want to go back to either plotting or scripting and all that stuff, or coming up with ideas. But one of the things I covered in that series are mind maps. And if you're not familiar with mind maps, it's a non-linear way of taking notes. So typically when you take notes, you have a heading, and then you have your bullet points, bump, 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 bump. The problem with that is that it's, if you say, oh, there needs to be something over here, then you got to move it around. And I guess if you're working digitally, you can do that. But with mind maps, you start with a circle, whatever your general idea is, and then you just sort of branch out. You put other circles here. Now this goes to this, and this goes to this, and connects. It's kind of like if you watch those crime dramas or whatever, where people are trying to figure out the crime, and it's got all this red string and everything connecting all these different things. That's sort of what a mind map is. But you start with this general idea, and it kind of spreads out from there, and then you can kind of figure all that out. So that's one of the techniques I use. The other one, if you're using some stories may just have one or two characters, and it's a little easier to keep track of all that. But since I'm working with sort of an ensemble cast, I've got all these kids, and there's a few adults in there too, and other stuff that's going on, and they kind of split up and everything. I want to keep track of where they are in my story, so I'll do and I don't know, there's probably maybe a better term for this, but I do what's called story maps, where I'm just kind of writing like, oh, these characters are here at this point in time, they're together, these 4 characters, these other 2 characters over here. But ultimately in my story, as you know, these characters are split up, the goal is to have them all meet up at one central location, and that's where the rest of the story is going to play out. Now, as that story plays out, because it's an ensemble cast, I want each character to have sort of their part to play in how this whole thing, you know, unfolds, and sort of their moment in the sun. So it's just not like they're just characters thrown in there. Some of them, you know, originally were just there for either comic relief or whatever, but I still want each character to have their moment. So that's one thing that I'm trying to do, and that's why I'm kind of shifting characters around and everything. Like, oh no, this makes sense for this character to do instead of that, and but it's a lot of fun now that I'm really getting into that. Another big challenge that I'm having with writing the conclusion of this story is that because this story is going to come to an end, there are a lot of loose ends and things to wrap up, and there's a lot of mysteries or just things that I need to explain that haven't been explained. They've been alluded to, but now's the time where you get all these reveals, all right? So, and in order to do that, I have to do a lot of exposition. I have to have people explaining things. If you don't do that right, you can sort of lose your audience, or it could just be too much information. And I worry about that because there is really a lot of information that I've got to put out there to make all this stuff make sense, and just let everyone know, oh, this makes sense now. All this stuff that I've seen here, it all comes together. And that's really important to me, that you know, there aren't really any loose ends, that all the questions are answered and everything. So in order to do that, I have to do these expositions, and I have characters having to talk. So one of the things that I'm writing into the story right now is that I don't just want the person standing there. And I had to do this earlier with another scene where scientists sort of explained how the doctors work, and I did that the kids were watching a video, like a video cassette where it was like a daily log. So it was a little different way to do that rather than just somebody telling you what's going on, and it kind of cuts away and everything. So that's one of the things that I'm gonna have to do now, and that is, you know, when these characters are talking, it's gonna go into some flashbacks, and some reveals and things that you hadn't known, and also just cutaways or little visuals that go along with what they're talking about. And I'd like to get a little more specific, but I don't want to quite yet. So that's probably one of my biggest challenges I'm facing, is when you got a lot of information that you're putting out there. So I'll put it out to you guys. How do you handle that? Because a lot of, you know, and I've been guilty of putting a lot more text on a page than typically people would advise you to do in comics. But then, you know, there'll be breathing points where, and I'm doing this now, where all this dialogue, not dialogue, but this information, it's not just gonna be dumped on you all at once. I'm gonna have like a scene, and then we'll cut away to an action scene, and then we'll go back to some more exposition, and then keep doing that, so it's not just, you know. And I like to do that too. If you've read my story, you'll know that I kind of flip back around. Like the way the last issue of the story, any of these issues ended, I don't usually pick directly up from that point. I usually introduce something else, and oh, there's a whole other element. Well, what's going on with this? You left off with this, but we got to get back to that. So kind of keeping people engaged and introducing new things, and like, oh, I really want to know what happened to these characters, but what's going on here with this? This is something new. And then, yeah, and every time I introduce a new element, then I have to make it, you know, I'm not just throwing things out there for no reason. I'm building something up, and the challenge, of course, is having everything make sense when it's all done. So that's sort of what I'm into right now. This is just the first week of 100 Days of Making Comics Challenge. I've got a long way to go. So, but I feel like I've made like a lot of progress. Just, you know, and I wish there was just more that I can show you, but like anytime I've taken this challenge before, the beginning is all just sort of me talking about the writing process, and it's an important part. You can't, you know, I mean, you can sort of just dive into it. You can sort of do Marvel method and just draw some cool stuff and then fill in the dialogue later. That's one way to do it. That's typically not the way I do. I tend to want a full script when I'm done, but everyone works differently, so it's kind of up to you guys how you do that. Just sharing my personal process. Now, the other thing I talked about is, you know, is this going to be the final issue, or is there going to be 2 more issues? I have a feeling, and I'm still haven't totally decided, but as I'm going, I found an interesting place to stop as far as this issue and then have another issue out there. So I'm guessing it's gonna go 6 issues. Hopefully it's not gonna take as long to put out there, because I'm gonna sort of do it as one big issue and probably put them out like, you know, because like I said, I'll have the, if I do one issue now as part of my 100 days of making comics, the next time around, I'm not gonna have to be doing this part of it where I'm talking about how I wrote it, because it'll already be written. So that's kind of the cool part. But I did find this cool stopping point if I want to stop for issue 5 and then go on to issue 6. But the only thing I'm not sure about, and this will become clear once I start writing my dialogue and once I start sort of doing my breakdowns and my thumbnails, how much I can fit in there. Because if this stopping point, if there's just a whole lot of comic before it, that it makes it like 40 pages before I get to this point, and then after that, if it's only like 5 pages, then it's not gonna work. But I think it's sort of in the middle of these two ideas. I just wanna make sure that I don't have too much story before this event that I'm thinking of stopping on, because it's kind of a cool reveal, and make sure that I have enough afterwards. So anyway, that's where I am now. I assume in the weeks to come, I'm still gonna be hammering out all the writing and stuff like that. But I'm, like I said, it's really just cool to be back doing this. It's cool to have you guys watching it. And hopefully you guys are doing your own comics, whether you're taking the challenge or however you decide to do it. But I want to know about it. I want to know what you think of some of the ideas that I put out there. Do they resonate with you? Do you think they're kind of crazy? Do you do it a different way? Are you more Marvel method? Are you more full script? Are you more, I like to work with a team and collaborate rather than just working by yourself and trying to figure all this stuff out, driving yourself crazy? But anyway, let me know what you guys are thinking. And that's going to do it for this week of the 100 Days of Making Comics Challenge. I'll be back with week 2 next week. I'll see you then. That is all. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can follow me at Serkworks on social media, and now you can support the work that I do on Patreon. Do you like making comics? Then go to Serkworks.com and pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's packed full of fonts, brushes, templates, and more. And best of all, it's totally free.